Welcome to the Internal Divinity Show with thought leader Lynda Lamp, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life. In this confusing and clouded world, sometimes we lose sight of our blessings and the light we carry inside us. In the next hour, Lynda will show you the divinity that you have within you and give you the tools you need to let it shine forth. Become a force for good, strengthen your inner divinity, and help create the heaven on earth we all desire. The Internal Divinity Show starts now.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Lynda Lamp, and you're watching and listening to the Internal Divinity Show, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with me for the next hour and let me help you experience a new way to look at life and the world. Each month on the second Tuesday, I'll share secrets that I've learned or experienced, and I'll answer your questions on how to see and experience more divinity in your life. This is a call-in show, and I am here to support you in your quest to experience and help create heaven on earth. So the phone number for the studio is 1-800-930-2819. And my wonderful producer, Colton, will assist you. Be sure you give him a copy or your phone number and your email so I can send you a digital copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. So we're here together again for an hour to bust some more myths about life. And I'm hopeful that I will come to help you see that this is really a very magical place. First of all, episode 2 is about you're not your body and helping you to learn to navigate your housing. So today we're going to get into the subject of our bodies and our housing. But before we do that, we need to kind of set the stage, if you will, for what our housing is doing and what we're doing here. I know last week or last month in that episode when we closed, I said we were going to tackle the halls of history, and we're going to postpone that because I got some feedback and some questions, and people would like to learn a little bit more about the reference that I made to the idea that life is really a play. So this is really a magical place. When you understand what's going on around us from a scientific and physics point of view, it's really a mystery. It's mind-boggling and it's beyond explainable, right? To understand that if you take anything we have, anything in physical form, and look at it under a microscope, under the strongest lenses that we have, everything looks the same. And yet when you look around you, nothing looks the same. Everything is different and with different textures and I mean, all kinds of different qualities. So right there, you're experiencing magic. I was just reading a Stephen King book recently, and the title of the book was Fairy Tale, and in it he says, "I think all the worlds are magic. We just get used to it." And see, we're used to this. We're used to all of these three-dimensional things surrounding us, when in fact, this is not actually a three-dimensional place. So this notion that everything that we're looking at is as it is really it's not real. So, and when you just have to know what to look for. When I was younger, I used to envision that it was an invisible hand on a chessboard that would make these remarkable things in my life happen. the timing of some of the things that have happened in my life are just really like not explainable. And so I understand now that it's much more sort of the influence of angels and the energy that we're putting into our lives. And so my description has evolved into life being a play. And our bodies are actually our costumes for our souls and our spirits. Our costumes wear outfits, but our bodies are not actually us. We reside within our bodies. And so this is our housing. And when we make the agreement to come here, and remember we talked about last month, we all agree to come here. And I know there are a lot of people that are so unhappy in their lives right now here that that's hard to accept, that we all agreed to come here, because it doesn't feel that way. And a lot of what we're experiencing in our daily lives doesn't feel good. And I'm going to explain to you why a lot of that is, probably by the third or fourth segment of this show. But, and if I forget to do that, someone please remind me, because it's the whole point of being here today is to get to there. Okay. So when we agree to come here, I don't know how much input or choosing goes into picking our costumes. I don't have a memory of that. I don't have a memory of picking my costume. What I do know, however, is that for me in my life, it was extremely important that I have brown eyes, which is a whole other thing that we can get into at some point, but it's totally irrelevant to this, other than the fact that I know that came into a part of it. I could not be the light that I believe myself to be and have blue eyes. I wouldn't feel my lineage or I don't know. I just know that it was a requirement that I have brown eyes, part of the script of the play. And I want to clarify that when I say script, I don't mean anything in a hard fashion. Yes, I needed to have brown eyes, but I could have gotten them any number of ways, right? There was no hard and fast way that I had to get them. And that in our lives, we don't have a hard and fast script. When we come here, we're coming here with the intention of being grace, love, and hope to those around us, and to be in service to each other in the creation of heaven on earth. That's it. That's why every single one of us is here on this planet. Now, we can look around and we can identify a whole lot of people that are not actually doing those things, being that way. So, those people, I like to describe those people as being sort of off stage and out of the theater. And that's where free will comes in. Because when we get here, we all remember at a certain level, at our soul level, our housing knows why we're here and what we're here to do. Every single one of us knows when we embody why we're here. But what happens is it's very easy to forget. And that forgetting, I believe, is a byproduct of the physical realm that we're living in, and the physics and the gravity that surrounds us. Because we're energetic beings, we're light beings. We're light beings, and yet we're running around in these very dense, heavy bodies, costumes that we've put on to have the experience of being in form. So it's very easy to forget why you're here and that you're here to be in service to others, not necessarily in service to yourself, in a capitalistic form or manner, right? So those of us who have forgotten, I like to say, have left the theater, and they're really out doing sort of sideshows. It's like there's a carnival going on, and there are all these sideshows outside of the theater building. Those of us who understand that we're living in this magic place where things will magically show up, the timing of which cannot be explained. It's just like in a play, right? If you're the actor on the stage, all kinds of magic things are happening. The lights change, scenery changes. You might walk off stage and someone will completely give you a new costume for you to, outfit for you to wear back out on stage and do it in maybe 5 or 10 seconds even. Now that's magic, right? And here comes the same person and the lights have changed and now the time is different and they're dressed differently. Some of us live life like that all the time. And that's because we're more connected and in tune, and our frequency is more aligned with what the agenda on the planet is, which is to create heaven on earth, create and experience heaven on earth. So that's the script. That's the extent of the script. We each come here, perhaps with an idea, perhaps with a notion of how we might go about being in service to one another. I know I came here knowing, and I started telling people when I was very little. And that's, of course, why they gave me that nickname of just like a lamp without the P, because I was being illuminating even then. So I've always known. Everyone knew when they got here, but most people have forgotten. And so once you can remember, oh, yeah, that sounds a lot better than what I'm trying to do here in my life, in this, free will choice that I've made. But let me maybe learn how my body works and get more in tune with my light being and my frequency and my energy. And maybe I'll go back into the theater, get up on that stage and experience some of the magic that can go on. Now, it's not to say that there isn't magic outside of the theater, outside of the play, but it's a lot harder to see and feel. And I think for it to happen, it takes a lot more effort on the part of the energy that supports us. And so what I mean by that is, and this will be controversial to some of you listening, but everything is imbued with a level of divine consciousness. It couldn't be here if it wasn't. And so, yes, even the rocks and the dirt and the trees and everything, innate and not innate, animated and not, everything has some level of consciousness. One only needs to ask for heart-shaped rocks and then go walk on the beach and find a multitude of heart-shaped rocks to know what I'm saying is true. You can develop a relationship with all of the inanimate things around you. And you'll be amazed at what kinds of magic you can have in your own little house, just with the stuff that you live with, right? once you can relate to it and understand that it is participating in this grand illusion that we call life on Earth. Right? It really is a magical place. And oh my goodness. Okay, we need to go to break, don't we? The chat was behind my my notes. And so let me just lead us into a break, okay? You're listening to the Internal Divinity Show with Lynda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll speak with any callers that have called in, and we'll pick up where we left off. Remember, if you'd like to call in, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819. And if you'd prefer to text, you could also text here to the studio at 901-907-351-3003. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Transformation Talk Radio with the Internal Divinity Show hosted by Lynda Lamp. Remember, please feel free to call in at any time. The studio number is 1-800-930-2819. Or if you'd prefer to text, you can text me in the studio here at 1-907-351-3003. So we've been discussing the idea of life as a play and our bodies as our costume for our souls and our spirits. If we get in, as we get into this next segment, if you can relate or you have a story you'd like to share, please do call in. Learning from one another is how we get through this thing we call life, right? I think it was Ramtha that said, or no, Rumi maybe, we're all walking each other home. And I really do believe that. I am here to be in service to all of you in whatever way I can to make your life easier in whatever way you can. So let's do that. Don't be shy. And that's why a couple of people said, well, I didn't want to call in because I didn't want my voice on the air, but I wouldn't have minded texting. So that's why we've decided to go ahead and have a texting number as well. So, and remember, you'll get a free copy of a digital copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else, which is intended to be, it's volume 1 of a 3-volume series I'm writing, intended to be humanity's handbook for living consciously in the 21st century. So I wanted to transition now and start to talk more about the body. And I have a quote I was looking for here. Yes, here we are. So there's a fairly famous Catholic priest by the name of Pierre de Chardin, who said, "I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience." And that is indeed what is going on here. Each of us are spiritual beings. We are animated by our spirit, and we contain, the housing contains our soul. Now, what that means, it means a couple of things. We talk about this concept of time, and a lot of people will make reference to past lives. Actually, time doesn't exist except in this realm, in this 3D realm, in order to experience things in a linear fashion. We've made this stage to have time work for us. But in the grand scheme of things, from a physics and quantum physics point of view, there is no such thing as time. Everything is happening at once. Now, I can't really explain how our lives work, But rather than thinking of reincarnation, think of it more like a spiral where you're always in it. You just may be in a different place in it. So here's the time. This is the range of time. This might be Jesus's period here, and this might be where we are now. And every life that you've come into this realm is in this column here, or spiral if you do it this way. And so when you have flashbacks to previous lifetimes, or if you've ever done any past life regression, we think that we're going in a linear way backwards, when in fact we're just going somewhere else on this column or in this spiral. So this is why it's so important to heal, because if you can heal yourself in this lifetime of something, you're actually healing it through all lifetimes. And whether that's a physical healing or an emotional healing, it works the same way. So this is why I think it's so important to understand that you're not your housing, because our housing has and does things that, and wants things that are not necessarily always the best for us and our mission here. I'll give you a quick side story that relates to this. This spring, I live in Alaska, and this spring, and I have a lodging business. And so in the summer is when we make our living, basically, between May and September. And then pretty much everybody goes home, and we get the beauty and the amazing experience of living in this wild place for the rest of those months to ourselves. But for the most part, that's when we make our living. And so real quick, I'm going to do this in 3 minutes. We had a landslide on the road that leads to my lodging business. And it happened on something like the 6th of May. And I happened to be in town on the other side of my business, on the other side of this landslide, because I was at a convention that I had helped co-host. And we were indeed actually out on a boat on the water, on a boat tour, when the landslide happened. And when I got back to land, now there was alcohol on this boat. There was alcohol on the boat. But for whatever reason, it wasn't until my feet hit ground, and it was actually, I was still on the docks, technically not ground quite yet, but the moment my foot touched that dock, the first thing my body wanted to do was go get a drink. And I was just sort of walking along, and I was sharing my experience of my housing having an agenda of its own with my companion as I was walking along. I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm going to say this. But if I let my body do what it wanted to do right now, it would go to a bar and get drunk. And being able to recognize and not just be dragged to the bar by my housing that I've given control over to, I think is a really important aspect of living in this regard, to learn how to manipulate and control. Because if we know what kind of trouble we can get into when we just give up and let our body go do what it wants to do. I had a lot of business I had to take care of that night. I was up till quite hours in the early hours of the morning, dealing with upcoming reservations and people that, needed to get to my property and how were they going to and all of that. And it would have been really a disaster had I given in to the whim of my housing. So that's just one example of understanding how to differentiate you and the costume that you're living in. We're going to get ready to go to another break. So let's see here. We're taking our second break. I'm Lynda Lamp, and you are listening to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. If you want to call in, remember 1-800-930-2819. We're back on the Internal Divinity Show with Lynda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm here with you today talking about our bodies and how they work in the grand scheme of the universe. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 1-800-930-2819. Or you can text me here in the studio on the phone here at 1-907-351-3003. So we've been talking about our bodies and how we're spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way around. And so that's a good segue into what happens when we supposedly die. And what I'm here to tell you is that you don't die. You're housing the costume. The costume might wear out. The costume might be in a car accident, and you might decide at that point to leave. The costume will cease at some point to function, and it will die. But you do not. That's how you can have all these different lives on this column or spiral, because you are an individuated aspect of the whole, of divinity, of everything that is, of the all and all. So you don't die. And you don't, I guess I need to back up a minute and make sure that we clarify that you don't ever come here for a punishment, to be taught something. You don't come here to learn something unless it was your choice. But it was never a directive. It was never a requirement. So if I were to leave here today, not fulfilling the dream I have for helping people, there would be no punishment. There would be no judgment about it. I would return to the whole. And we collectively, divinity collectively, would decide what's next. Back again for another ride? Somewhere else for a different kind of ride? Nowhere? Stay in heaven and just experience being the pure energy? Become an archangel and help other people energetically? The choices, the options are unlimited. And so you don't die. And yes, you do get to see the other entities that you've loved in this lifetime and experience, the energies that were carnated here while you were here that you've missed. You get to do that. But then you return to the collective, which is even a more wondrous experience. You return to the fold of divine love. You what is the word? You vibrate at that frequency. And it is amazing. It's incredible. So just our bodies die. And a lot of times, spiritual people will try to comfort people who have experienced a recent death in the family, usually somebody close to them, and will try to share the information that they didn't really die. And my suggestion is that's not the appropriate time, right? Later, when they're done with their grief, you can have that discussion with them. But until then, the more important thing to do is to just be in service to them, to honor how they're feeling, to allow them the experience that they're choosing to have. See, this is the thing. We really do have a great deal of choice in how we experience what happens around us. And that choice is because we can look at it from that place of divine nature and understand that whether we like it or not, whatever it is that's shown up, especially when we don't like what's shown up, that there's nothing wrong here. People, there is a belief, and we'll spend an episode, I'm sure, deconstructing religion is what I call it, talking about the influence that religion has on our lives. And really, at this point, outside of any community that it's providing, most religions are actually teaching things that just aren't true. They're lost in the myth of what's here, and they're not really in flow with what true nature is and what true divinity is. Because as you'll come to know, religion really is a form of control. And if we're all divine, if we're all divinity in form, we shouldn't really need to be controlled. I mean, certainly things like traffic signs so that and signals so that cars can manage, and those kinds of things, airplanes in the sky, they need to be controlled in terms of where they're going and when they're going, where they're going. But human beings on a day-to-day basis, really, if you're in tune with your role in the play of being joy, grace, and love, hope, and being that in service to others, why would we need to be controlling each other? So we don't die. Only our costumes die. We don't die. And when we go back into the fold, there's also no punishment. That's what I was getting back to. There's no punishment for not accomplishing something or for having done something. There's no punishment. That's not what it's about. We came here to create and experience heaven on earth. And if we didn't do that, there's no penalty. It's a play. Come back and try again. That's about the extent of it. So let's really start to talk about our bodies and the housing, the costume that we're wearing. This costume it comes with a whole lot of predetermined things. First of all, it knows how to work on its own, right? You don't consciously think I need to breathe. And when you cut yourself, you don't consciously think, ooh, I need this stuff to flow here, and I need this to seal up here, and right, it just happens. Your body heals. It closes up the wound, it forms a scab. Maybe it leaves a scar behind if it was really damaged. Maybe it doesn't, though. There are a lot of times when we cut ourselves or wound ourselves when our skin doesn't show anything, any damage. So there's a lot going on here. All of the physiology and the biology is all going on, and we're pretty much oblivious to it. Everything knows on its own what to do, and it knows how to interact with itself and with each other. And how do I say this? Things just, they work, right? But when we get back from break, we're going to talk about some of the wiring that the body has that influences our daily behavior. And that's where it's really important to understand what's going on with your body, because there are times where you can be in control. You can't control your skin so much, although you can, through meditation, help it. I wouldn't say you're controlling it, though, but you can control other parts of your body that are that we think of as wiring. You can control them when you become more conscious about how they're working. So in just a moment or two, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're really going to delve into this in more finite detail. So here we go. I'm Lynda Lamp, and you're listening to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. If you want to call in, the number's 1-800-930-2819 or text 1-907-351-3003. We're back on the Internal Divinity Show with Lynda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. We've been discussing our bodies and how they work in ways not commonly discussed. If you'd like to call in, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819, and you'll qualify for a free copy of a digital copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. You can also text to 907-351-3003. So with only about 10 minutes left, I really want to get into the wiring. The hard wiring in our body is what I refer to as our ego. Now, there's the psychological ego that Freud talked about, and this is not the ego that I'm speaking of. The ego that I'm speaking of is the ego that actually is the wiring within your housing, within your costume, that wants to protect you and keep you alive and make you safe. So there is a desire within this costume that you've put on. Every single costume that we put on this planet, in this realm, has the desire to keep you safe and keep you protected, and protect you in whatever way it can when you're under attack. And so this is where the freeze, fight, and flee notion comes from. And you'll also hear added to that now, more recently, they've added fawn to that. Fawn, however, I believed, is a learned response. So let's talk about these three for a minute. When you are attacked or frightened or scared, you tend to have one of three reactions. you're either freeze like a doe in the headlights, you flee, run away, or you fight. Those are internal to your being. These are things that your body will want to do. And it is only through learning that you have these things within you that you can learn to respond in a different way. So I want to give you an example. I could spend a lot of time talking about these mechanisms, but I want to give you an example, maybe a couple of examples that will help illustrate what I'm talking about. So one is a short story. Where I live in a rural area, as you know, and I needed to call the borough. We kind of like a county, but we call them boroughs. I needed to call the borough road office, and I called, and I got somebody brand new. And at that point, I think I'd been living here for 10 or 15 years. And this young gal really didn't know anything. And I was trying to explain to her what needed to happen to this road. And it was taking an insane amount of time. And I was being given information that just wasn't accurate. And what I observed within myself was an anger starting to bubble up. And I could feel my body wanting to yell at her for her incompetence and for wasting my time. And if you're not aware of what's happening, then your ego's driving the bus, as I like to say, and you end up yelling at the person. And we all know what happens when we get to that point and we're yelling at people. Our energy is all tangled up with all kinds of things, and we're not being ourselves most of the time. Oftentimes when we lose our temper, we look back on it and we go, wow, where did that come from? Well, where it came from primarily is within you. That's the first place it might come from. But now I'm going to give you another example, because remember, we're energetic beings. Everything is energy flowing around us, and we are energy. In the next story, I'm driving back from a trip to Anchorage. I am in the middle of nowhere, and I'm on a section of road where I can see behind me for miles. Miles and miles and miles along the coastline on this coastal road. I can see behind me because it's October and it's dark and everybody's got headlights on. So there's nothing because there isn't anybody. And then all of a sudden, here comes this car. And I can see it in the back behind me. And it's coming at what can only be described at an insane speed, ridiculously fast, coming behind me. When it gets close enough to behind me, I also realize he has his high beams on. But I do what I would normally do under those circumstances. I just drift over onto the shoulder, because it's a section where I have a dotted line, so he can pass me, but he's not passing me. He's just on my rear bumper, very close. And so I just I put my flasher on and I drift over to the shoulder, and still he won't pass me. So I get all the way off and I stop. But that last little getting off and stopping now contained an energy that didn't feel right to me. And all of a sudden, I was filled with the desire to get back out behind him and floor my accelerator, put my high beams on, and just chase him down the highway. And I just sat there on the side of the road thinking, what is this all about? And I realized the number 2 influence is the energy around us. So Dane here of Access Consciousness tells a great story about somebody leaving their home in an LA suburb and being in a happy mood, whistling and, being all grins and giggles. And by the time they get to work in downtown LA, they're a seething mass of rage of consciousness. Well, what happened to them? They just drove through a sea of people who are agitated and unhappy. And that influenced them. It influenced their energy field. So it's not, sometimes we hear people talk about needing to set up boundaries and protection. And it isn't that you need, because if everything is divine, if everything that exists in this 3D form is divinity, then what in the world would we need protection from? Right? We don't. We don't need protection from anything other than our own energetic being and how we choose to be, to express ourselves. And so I didn't get out on the road and chase that guy. I didn't do any of those things. I sat there. I blessed him. I wished him well. But what happened was that energy field washed over me, and I felt it. And my ego, my wiring of my housing, my costume, was like, you can't do that to me. I won't let you. The indignity. That's all just, it's a fantasy. But that if you don't understand how that wiring's working, and you don't understand how your body's natural impulses may be taking you places that you don't want to go, you can learn how to control and be in charge. So I think that's probably where we're going to have to leave things for today. I really thought we'd get a lot further into this discussion. But in any case, you have a month to submit questions. If you'd like to contact me, you can go to my website, Lynda Lamp, www.lindalamp.com. And remember, it's LYNDALAMP.com. You can send me a message there, or you can schedule a private session. You can visit my online store from there. And that, if you go there directly, that's lindalamp.shop. You'll find hardback and paperback and digital copies of my book. You'll also find private sessions and opportunities to become a sponsor if you like my work. I've had a wonderful time with you today, and I hope you found the information I shared interesting and helpful. Feel free to reach out to me between now and the next show. I'm Lynda Lamp, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Internal Divinity Show today. Please join me the second Tuesday of every month. Next month, it'll be February 14th, Valentine's Day, how very appropriate, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we'll dive deeper into the myths of busting of life. I hope to see you then. Namaste.
Thank you for joining in on the Internal Divinity Show. As we view our world through a new lens of understanding, we discover our inner light and power. When enough of us receive clarity about life, heaven will begin to show up. Come back next time on the second Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific Time for more inspiration and instruction on unleashing your inner deity. To learn more or to contact Lynda, visit www.lindalamp.com. That's www.lindawithaylamp.com.